Good afternoon, and thanks for joining today's event, Comparing Cloud and On-Premise ERP. I'm Steve, and I'll be your host today. I see some familiar faces from previous sessions, so we'll make the introduction a little shorter today. Just as a reminder, for our Q&A session at the end, just type your question into your GoToWebinar pane, hit send, and at the end of the presentation today, we'll answer any question that you submit. Very happy to be joined by Chris Garrity this afternoon. Chris is a Vice President here at Terillium, and Chris has had leadership roles in both our cloud and on-premise implementation practices. So he's uniquely qualified to talk about our topic today of kind of comparing and contrasting cloud and on-premise ERP systems. I think you've all seen this before, but just in case, Terillium is an ERP consulting firm. We implement ERP projects. We have won awards for many of our projects in an industry where these projects can be risky. We focus on our customer success. I think we're only as good as our last reference, and really recognize all of our consultants for their ability to deliver our award-winning services. We've got about 170 of those consultants across the United States who work directly for us. And we came up with the concept of this web series to target folks who may be thinking about a new ERP system and help get them past challenges like, how do we start this process? What's the best way to pick the right product? Show you demonstrations of a few different products. Have kind of thought leadership sessions like the one Chris will conduct today to start thinking about the type of system at a high level that might work best for you. So hopefully this adds some value and helps you along that path. So far we've talked about preparing for your ERP project. We've seen NetSuite. This morning we saw Oracle's ERP Cloud product. Those are both cloud products. Chris will compare cloud to on-premise, and then tomorrow morning, we'll look at an on-premise solution, J.D. Edwards. Right after this session, we'll talk about barcoding and inventory and warehouse automation. And then tomorrow afternoon, we'll end by talking about some of the factors that can contribute to either your success or failure in an ERP project based on tons of ERP projects that we've seen. So now I'll turn it over to Chris. Again, Chris is an executive with us, and he has managed projects and practices in both cloud and on-premise worlds. And so he does a nice job of kind of putting those two next to each other, talking about the differences, the pros and cons, and helping you start to think about things in terms of cloud or on-premise. So Chris, welcome to the webinar. We're all excited to see what you have to share with us.
Well, thank you, Steve. I appreciate that. And good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us. As Steve said, I've spent a good deal of my career working in the on-premise world, but in the last couple of years, I've had the opportunity to work in Terillium's cloud ERP practice, and it's been a learning curve for me. As is always the case with consultants, a lot of what I learned from my clients. So what you're going to hear today is really information that our clients thought was important or things that were confusing to them when they first got started thinking about moving into the cloud. And so I hope that today will at least clarify some of the nuts and bolts and some of the differences between the two offerings. It's worth mentioning that again, my background's largely with J.D. Edwards. That's the on-premise solution of choice right now for Oracle. But I do have experience with the Oracle ERP Cloud product. I don't really have any real experience with NetSuite, which is a cloud product, but that's something that Steve could probably answer questions about. It's his team that is doing that within Oracle. So overwhelmingly worked with the Oracle products, but I think a lot of what we're going to talk about today is relevant across any kind of a cloud, any kind of a on-prem ERP solution. So And why are we talking today? Well, fundamentally, I think the time is right to talk about cloud solutions because, as the slide shows, $160 billion by the end of this year. 97 billion of that is in the U.S. Probably doesn't surprise anyone that the U.S. is the leader in cloud services, cloud spend. So even if your organization isn't really moving to the cloud right now, this is happening, and a lot of people are looking at it. And I'm sure that if you talk to your colleagues at other business entities, you're realizing that there's a lot of movement going on right now. And I liken it to the transformation we went through back when we were moving from what we used to call green screen to client server. Back when we moved in J.D. Edwards' world, we moved from the world to the one world product. It is a major inflection point that we're going through right now. And while it doesn't all happen at once, it's happening. And so I appreciate you getting on, and we're going to talk about a couple of things that I think will be useful to you. Number one, we'll talk about some of the differences between cloud and on-prem. We'll do some defining terms because the word cloud means some different things to different people. So I'll try and break that down a little bit for you. Make sure that we're talking, apples to apples when we have the cloud conversations. And then talk about what our clients have taught us about why they are moving to the cloud, what's important to them, and how they might go about it. We have a lot of clients that are looking at hybrid solutions. In fact, you probably already have some in your shop. But if not, we'll certainly talk about what some of those opportunities are that we see our clients stepping into. So first off, the slide's up here, and I don't want to just say all the words on the slide, but one of the points I want to make here is, and I changed the color of the text. And on the on-prem ERP side, there was a time when I would have said lower lifetime costs if you stay with your on-prem ERP. I don't think we can really say that anymore. I'm confident that I can say to you that if you're moving to a new ERP, you can lower your initial costs going to the cloud because it's not an upfront software purchase with recurring maintenance. That's not the model. On-prem is like that, but cloud is really a subscription service based. So the difference is you're buying on-prem, you're leasing the cloud. So the initial costs are lower going to a brand new cloud solution versus going to a brand new on-prem. Over the lifetime of the software, I think you're going to find that it's become very, very competitive. Not only between cloud versus on-prem, but between the different cloud vendors. It's a very competitive landscape, and depending on exactly where you're moving from and what kind of cloud implementation you're looking at, you may or may not be able to realize some very significant cost savings. But it's very particular to what you're doing, and I wouldn't want to suggest that I can tell you off the top of my head that you're going to be able to save money, but there is a strong likelihood that you could. We'll talk about some of those factors as we go on. So cost is one of the reasons that clients are looking at cloud solutions versus on-prem. The other thing that you want to look at is functionality. There are certainly, most of these cloud products are going to be very function rich. They're going to have some of the latest kinds of functionality. Almost all of the products that you'll see in the cloud, for example, they're going to have optical character scanning of invoices. That's going to be built into the product from the get-go. Not such a remarkable idea. Of course, we can do that in the J.D. Edwards space, for example, but it's not native to the product. We have to bring in other complementary third-party products to accomplish the same thing. And that's just one example of the kinds of things that are capable in the cloud. I recently learned a bit more at Collaborate, the big Oracle conference, and we'll talk about some of the other functionalities that are available. But the net is there's new functionalities coming out, and pretty much all of the new development is going to be cloud-based going forward. I think you can look to that and expect that. Capabilities. One of the things we're seeing is just in the background, the infrastructure underlying the cloud products is quite a bit different than the capabilities of the on-prem. For example, cloud ERP, when it comes to integrations, the starting point for those integrations are going to be real-time web services. Now, we can always do batch and we can do file drops and all the kinds of capabilities that we've used in the past, but the tools that are available and the integration capabilities of the cloud products are very, very cutting edge. And while we can do many of those same things in JD Edwards and other on-prem products, those things have been added on and evolved over time, and they really aren't keeping up necessarily as well as some of these cloud ERP products have as brand new native capabilities. So your functionality layer is more robust, and your capability layers underneath can be decidedly better on the cloud versus on-prem. However, you may not have that skill set in-house, and you may need to develop it to take advantage of those new capabilities. I also want to mention technology. Again, I'm most familiar with the Oracle technology stack. Is I think kind of, you can tell all my products that I've got a lot of experience with are Oracle. You know, Oracle, people don't think of them as a hardware vendor, but they are. You know, they bought Sun many, many years ago, and they have tuned their technology stack, both hardware and software, to provide, you know, tremendous capabilities to support ERP implementations. The software products run very efficiently on that particular platform, and that's an advantage that you can't get anywhere else. So there is technology advantages. Conversely, again, new technology may not be things that you're familiar with. If you're running on an AS400 or an IBM iSeries, and you've got expertise on those operating systems, those database products, that's a reason to stay on that on-prem because you've got the skill sets around it. So again, it depends on what you're looking to accomplish. But also, with the cloud and ERP, vendors basically control a lot of the systems capabilities. When you're talking about uptime, when you're talking about things like security updates or database tuning, those things are all going to be controlled by your vendor in a cloud ERP environment, and not so much on the on-prem. That is all expected of you, and it's your responsibility. And we're going to talk a little bit more about upgrades and some other things as well. But so you're giving up some control if you go to the cloud as a general rule. But if you're staying on-prem, those things are all within your control, and you can make sure that your company's business needs are being met. Now, I've talked a bit about the characteristics, the differences, but let's be real precise here with regards to cloud. I've got a definition of ERP. I think probably everybody on the phone knows what an ERP product is. Again, the Oracle products are JD Edwards, NetSuite's Oracle ERP Cloud. But fundamentally, cloud technology means you get your system resources via the internet. Basically, you got to have a browser, and that's it. And the rest of it can all be provided by the cloud service provider. The other most obvious thing is cloud technology is rented. It's basically a contract for services with SLAs and all the other things you would expect around that. But the bottom line is you're renting it, not purchasing it. And there's three layers. And I think this is where we kind of get confused sometimes in the cloud. And you have these layers in on-prem, but you don't think of them as separate. And because of the cloud being newer, and because the different entities are providing different kinds of cloud services, it's important that you understand that there's really three layers. Software as a service, platform as a service, and infrastructure as a service. And you can buy infrastructure as a service all by itself. That's a possibility. In fact, when we think of hosting, that's what we're thinking about. Software as a service, most of us will probably think of something like Salesforce.com, probably the first and most successful software as a service entity. That's an application layer here. Let me move to the next slide. That's an application layer that that is all SaaS based, and if you buy that software as a service, then you get the other two layers that go below it to support that infrastructure. But software as a service is the application layer. Think of it as your ERP software, whatever other end user system you're using. Software as a service, again, Salesforce is a particular CRM product. NetSuite is a software as a service application. But there are also many, many others. And one of the advantages of having a cloud-based SaaS product is all the other cloud services that are growing up around our ERP systems. I will tell you, recently I had a client, J.D. Edwards client, that was looking for a parcel freight shipment system, something that had real-time integration to UPS and FedEx and those kinds of service providers, freight service providers. All of the third-party products we looked at were offered as a cloud service. Some of them were also available as an on-prem, but all of the newer development for those providers were being done in the cloud. I also recently I heard about at the Collaborate conference that I was at in April, a service provider called Nforms, and all they do is provide safety forms for government entities. So if you have health and safety requirements by the government entity here in the States or really anywhere in the world, there are certain forms you have to fill out for safety incidences and those kinds of things. Well, what Nforms does is they keep track of all the revisions of all the forms for all the government entities you might be involved in. And for those of you who've been involved in forms development, you know that it can be a tedious, if not a complex task. What these guys do is they provide you the form content with web services so that you provide the data, and they will fill out the form and deliver it to the government entity that it needs to go to. I think that's an interesting example of, we think of data and big data and all of the changes that are coming with Internet of Things, but here's an example where the cloud is providing forms content, and we can hook that up through web services to your cloud ERP and provide you software as a service, and you don't have to worry about forms development anymore. Just a very simple but straightforward example, and why not? Why not have somebody else keep track of all of that? Similar to how we do taxes for the most part, where we use a third-party service to provide us all the different taxes if you've got sales tax concerns and the different taxing authorities that you have to keep up with. SaaS, software as a service, is what we normally think of when we think of cloud. There's also an in-between layer, platform as a service. This is, I know Oracle uses this language, as do some of the other vendors. Some don't talk about this, but generally speaking, platform as a service is the layer right underneath software as a service that provides us our middleware layer. So our development tools, our workflow tools, configuration tools. In the J.D. Edwards space, we often talk about tools releases, and this is that layer. Any kind of integration services that are being provided, that's PaaS layer. And again, it's possible to just buy platform as a service capabilities really unto themselves to help you get workflow or integration services done. That's an area that we specialize in at Terillium within our cloud practice. We're very, very, very good with the integration services. That's been an expertise we've developed. And then the last one, the IaaS, I want to talk about is infrastructure as a service. And this is, by another name, this is hosting, okay? But it's hosting, and if you want, you can take your on-prem app, and you can avoid the SaaS and the PaaS layers, and you can just go and host it in the cloud. We have a number of clients that are doing that now. And you know, again, you're basically removing your data center internally. You're moving everything to the cloud. And we've got somebody else now in the IaaS service provider, and they're responsible for your sizing. They're responsible for scalability and making sure that you have the right uptime and all the other things that you worry about when you're running a data center. We have people running on Amazon. They provide these kinds of services. Microsoft provides them as well, although we don't have any clients doing Microsoft. Google, of course, is out there doing this, and Oracle is out there doing this. And all of them can provide infrastructure as a service for an on-prem application. And the truth of the matter is, this is probably where most cloud dollars are going, is into infrastructure as a service, where people are taking an on-prem application and moving it to an infrastructure as a service. And the advantages they're finding there is basically that they find cost savings, and they remove the requirement for IT staff, because they can get the expertise they need from the AIS infrastructure as a service provider. That's where that pays off, and it's the very robust capabilities. As you can imagine, somebody like an Oracle, when it comes to tuning a database, there are a few people that are going to be better at that. And that's an example of the kind of service you can get. And all of that's done without you having to worry about it. They're worried about it, so you don't have to. There is one very big differentiator in the IaaS space that we probably want to mention now, and maybe we'll come back to it later, and that is that originally there was a lot of concerns when people were talking about the cloud and moving to cloud infrastructure with being in a multi-tenant environment. And while some people are concerned with that because they're worried about their data being shared or other people being able to access their information, security has always been an issue there, a concern there. Don't know if it's really been a real issue, but it's been a concern. Do know that most of the infrastructure as a service providers are providing single tenant kinds of services, not just the multi-tenant. So both are available to you, depending on which vendor you're talking to, but most of them will do a single tenant because the marketplace wasn't ready to go multi-tenant. That's just true. Now, it costs them more to support you, single tenant, so the services are a little more expensive. But again, it's a very cost competitive environment, and I think you'll find that it still may be a less expensive solution for you than keeping your own data center running in-house. And again, this is the area where we see a lot of people moving forward into the cloud by going to infrastructure as a service to support their on-prem application. Now, if we got the three layers, let's talk about some of the things that people are interested in and why they're moving to the cloud. Key reasons: functionality. They see improved functionality. They find that they can reduce their costs. The management of upgrades. This can be viewed as a strength or a weakness depending on how you look at it. We'll talk about that. Security and uptime. Again, key components to why people look at the cloud, and then return on investment. Now, I want to say that in our experience, people are either interested in moving to the cloud or they're not. When they look for, really hard measurements that are ROI driven or quantifiable in some other way, it's very difficult to see huge differences between a cloud solution and an on-prem solution. The numbers can kind of say what you want them to say. What it comes down to in our experience is that the people that are just interested in moving to the cloud, their attitude is the cloud is the next frontier, and they don't want to be on the bleeding edge, but they want to be near the leading edge. They're interested in moving to the cloud, and they find reasons to do it. And we're going to talk about what some of those reasons are. Note that when we talk about things like security and uptime, even the return on investment piece of this, a lot of that has to do with infrastructure as a service, not so much SaaS kinds of criteria, but the software as a service criteria, functionality, upgrades, those things, those are real as well. So you have to look at it, and you have to look at it by layer within the cloud architecture. So first up, what our customers are telling us with regards to functionality, okay? our customers feel like they are getting ahead by moving to the cloud. That's just what they're telling us. I already talked about this, but the accounts payable. Right now in the cloud, you can get accounts payable functionality where you scan the invoice, an optical character read will OCR read the invoice. It'll create a record with metadata. After having read the invoice, it'll store it and provide it for retrieval. There are tax capabilities so that if a tax needs to be calculated, it'll verify that the tax is correct. It will then auto-match the invoice. If the invoice data has all been captured correctly, it'll check that against your PO, your receipt, and if everything aligns, it just automatically goes ahead and does the payment to the vendor. Basically, it's a management by exception. If nobody needs to look at it, nobody needs to touch it, they don't. And depending on the size of your AP operation, that could be a substantial increase in efficiency for your finance group. So, and that is just kind of like standard table stakes for the cloud SaaS operations. Again, we can achieve some of that in on-prem applications like JD Edwards, but you got to put the pieces together yourself. That's an example of the kind of functionality we can get. It's the other thing I'll mention is things like the user interface. The new cloud user interfaces look more like the kind of apps that you're used to seeing on your tablets, on your phones, on the consumer sites, you know, the Googles of the world and the other websites that you go out to. It's easier to use. Usability has gone up dramatically. The user interface, they're designed now with dashboards. We've got alerts that help us control workflow. You can store inquiries and watch lists in JD Edwards, for example, as well. But these cloud products are the ones that created it originally. And there's a lot of capabilities there. And while it's hard, again, to quantify what the value of that is, there certainly is value in these new interfaces. They make workflow much, much easier. And again, they support management by exception. So people will deal with the things they need to deal with. And we automate everything else that we possibly can. We've also found that while the information is easier to get at, the reporting tools in general are going to be much more robust. A lot more graphics are available in the cloud products, but the on-prem will allow you to do some of that as well now. But again, they're following or trailing around the capabilities that are coming out in these cloud products. Cost reductions. Again, I want to emphasize that you need to look at your particular scenario, what you're coming from, what your maintenance fees currently are, how many users you've got, and then you need to go look and see what that looks like if you try to move to the cloud, whether you're moving to an IaaS, infrastructure as a service, or software as a service kind of scenario. Initial costs are less because, again, there's no software purchase, but there is leasing, and of course, you've got to make you got to rent, you got to pay that monthly payment. So cost reductions are not clear, but they are prevalent. So you need to look at your situation, and I can tell you that costs change because you're moving to an offsite data center, and of course, IT personnel cost structure is decidedly smaller. But that doesn't mean that the total cost is going to be dramatically different. You need to look at your situation in particular. But there are opportunities, and we don't see anybody paying more for their cloud solution. Sometimes we see them paying dramatically less. Upgrades. Upgrades is one of the areas that our customers have focused on, because in the cloud, they are going to make you, the cloud software providers are going to make you upgrade. Now, again, this was a major concern, kind of like security was a concern, and the cloud providers have adjusted as a result of the concerns in the marketplace. Basically what they've done, and I'll use Oracle as an example. Oracle comes out with a new product release on their cloud ERP product about every 6 months. That means you're getting new functionality, improved capabilities every 6 months. So that's advantageous. However, you need to take the upgrade, and of course, upgrade can require regression testing depending on what's been modified in the system. Now, they will definitely do infrastructure as a service and PaaS or platform as a service upgrades on their own and not necessarily have to involve you. But when it comes to that SaaS layer, we definitely need to do regression testing to make sure that we haven't messed with any of our functionality, particularly if you have mods. Those things haven't really changed, although generally speaking, with the increased capabilities of cloud products, you don't have as many mods. Again, another payback on that. But what Oracle has done in this scenario is they will come out with a new release. They will give you 6 months to get up on that release. It's not you got to do it at one time. They don't dictate to you when you move that new release up into production. They make it available, and they give you basically until the next release comes out. They give you a timeline, and you get to pick within that interval when you want to move up to the new release. So it's become more flexible over time. And that problem, again, for some people, that will still be an issue because regression testing, it's difficult for them to ask their end users to get involved in a regression test. Conversely, any kind of upgrading has to have regression testing. We've got to make sure that everything still works. This makes you stay up. This makes you current. And there are advantages to that, but it is a major shift for a lot of organizations to say every 6 months we're going to take a software upgrade. We're going to need some of your time to do the regression testing. Again, it's not nearly as big a task because you're doing it every 6 months. So you don't need weeks of regression testing necessarily. Depending on what new is coming out, you know, and your footprint, it may be a day of testing. But it's a change, and it's something that people consider when they're moving to the cloud is what does that upgrade process look like? And then the other thing is security and uptime. Now, I'll give you a couple statistics here. NetSuite has 99.98% uptime. That's pretty good, and I think most of you would agree that it would be difficult for an on-prem solution for your IT organization to match that or exceed that, certainly. It's not an issue for our clients. They are happy with their uptime. And when it comes to security, a lot of clients we've got, I have a client right now that is coming up on-prem. And they originally hosted their JDOH environment. They chose to go on-prem. Their primary consideration there was security. They just didn't trust having their production data anywhere but in their own data center. And that, you know, if that's where you're at, then this cloud software is not for you. However, a very interesting statistic that I recently heard, more than 50% of all security breaches that have occurred over the past couple of years were avoidable. Over 50% of them were avoidable. The security patch that would have prevented the hack was available, but it had not been deployed. So more than 50% of the security breaches that you hear about are avoidable if the patches are all in place. And why aren't the patches in place? Well, because, again, so often, particularly in the on-prem environment, I'm going to say, security patching at all the different levels in your tech stack is a task, a priority task, but a task among many tasks that your IT staff is having to do. And for that reason, it's maybe not kept up as timely, or they're not as aware of all of the different security patches that are coming out at all the different levels of your tech stack. And something gets missed. It can happen. Most of our on-prem clients will admit that it's hard for them to keep up with security patches. Now, of course, that could exist. That could be a problem with your cloud solution, but I have to say that, you know, they're going to have dedicated staff that is making sure that all the latest security patches are in place for the entire tech stack. And I think that it's really a very reasonable to expect that a cloud solution could have very, very sound security, and it's something that a lot of our clients are now saying, yeah, we agree with that statement. Security is a non-issue for us. But you have to decide for yourself where you sit with that question and where you really legitimately think your information and your systems are going to be more secure. I think security and uptime is often used as a reason not to move to the cloud, and depending on how capable you are in that area, a cloud offering may not be able to be better, but for many of our clients it is. And it's an opportunity that you can leverage, again, at the IIS level or all for the entire infrastructure stack. And the number one reason that people look at cloud is really trying to get lower costs. It's just the trade-off of running your own data center versus moving it off. That's primarily what people are thinking about. But potentially lower costs, I'm going to say, not necessary. You got to look at your particular scenario. It does shift capital costs to expense because the cloud service is a service and you don't have to capitalize it. Some people find that attractive. There are businesses where that's an important issue. I can say categorically that initial costs are going to be cheaper because the licensing, again, you're renting instead of buying. The other return on investment is modernizing your business practices and making people more efficient. Again, very hard to dollarize that, but there are some very real capabilities. I've listed some of them here. Better access to information, better tools, more real-time integrations via the web services. You know, data becomes more timely. There's an advantage to that. Again, I have trouble telling you how much that's worth in dollars, but I think we can all agree that if that were an outcome of changing to a new ERP system, everyone would agree that there's a return on that investment. So how are people doing this? What are our clients doing? Well, there's a couple of different ways they're going about it. So number one, it doesn't have to be all or nothing. So that's the first thing we got to say. Moving to the cloud, some people are going to jump full both feet into the arena. I've got a client right now implementing cloud. It's in the healthcare industry, and everything is going to be cloud. That's their model. They don't really want to have a data center at all. Okay, that's one end of the spectrum. What a lot of people are doing, and probably are already, you've got it in your environment, is that you've got an on-prem ERP and you're supplementing it with SaaS offerings, things like Salesforce.com. I mentioned Nforms is another kind of capability. There are a number of cloud-based services that are available, and of course we can integrate to all of them, whether we do it real-time or in batch. We can integrate to the cloud services with our on-prem ERP. It's a very typical scenario. We see a lot of our clients moving in the Oracle space, CRM. They're using the Oracle Enterprise Planning and Budgeting cloud service, something similar to what Hyperion used to have for planning and budgeting, financial planning and budgeting. We have a project right now at Terillium where we are upgrading an ERP, our JD Edwards ERP environment to 9.2, but the client needed some more robust procurement sourcing capabilities. And so the project is an upgrade to 9.2, and they're going forward with Oracle Purchasing Cloud because of the sourcing capabilities in that product that are superior to JD Edwards. And so they've got a hybrid environment that they're going to implement, and we're writing that integration between that cloud product and JD Edwards. So hybrids are very typical. In fact, most of you probably have a hybrid scenario now with either a CRM or some other cloud application. It's also capable of leveraging PaaS tools, improving workflow capabilities. Oracle has a content experience cloud product that allows you to do things that support employee onboarding or other kinds of small applications where you need to have a place to store data, forms to create and maintain data on, with some approval cycle going around it. That's all workflow that PaaS services can support. The most popular, again, of all of the hybrid solutions is moving up onto IaaS, moving into that layer, having someone else support your environment, but keeping your current on-prem. That's the most popular hybrid solution that we're seeing, most common. And I will mention this because I think some people think of cloud, they think of certain scenarios, but there are some very interesting ways that the cloud services are being used. One of them is, suppose your production environment is on-prem, but you want to dip your toe, and one of the things you could do is you could support your development environment on an IaaS platform and kind of get your feet wet as to what that looks like by keeping those development and test environments and support them on IaaS while you remain on-prem for all of your production. That's one way to do it. The other, and I think this is a tremendous idea, is if I don't know how you're doing disaster recovery, but we have clients that are interested in moving to off-site, cloud-based disaster recovery site, one that really wouldn't be affected locally by, I don't know, a flood or electrical outages or what have you. So what they do is they basically back up their environment to a cloud environment that could be situated states away, it could be countries away if that were useful. I'm not sure I know that would be, but the point is that they buy a cloud service that allows them to have a copy of their production environment, and that's their hot site. With less chance for local disruptions, that seems to me like a really great application for cloud. And the ability to make sure that your hot site doesn't suffer from some of the same outages that your production site suffers from. And I do want to mention this just because the cloud environment is, moving and changing and evolving over time. Oracle actually provides a service where if you're in the defense industry in particular is one that comes to mind. I'm sure there's others, but in the defense industry, there's no way that they can have, the server operations outside of the infrastructure, outside of the local area network. It's got to be within the firewall. One of the things Oracle will actually offer, and I think this is just, I use this as kind of an outlier, but it's a good example of what's going on in the cloud environment. Oracle will actually build you infrastructure as a service all the way up to SaaS infrastructure on a box. They will take that box and they will put it in your data center behind your firewall, and they will manage it as their own cloud environment, as if it was sitting in their data center, to overcome the objection to needing it to be within your four walls, within your firewall. Again, I don't know I don't know if you even call that a cloud solution. I guess it's a hybrid of some kind, but the point is there's a lot of opportunities, and people are getting more and more creative. And if you see reasons that a more creative solution is something that you want to at least think about or explore, I think you'll find that all of the cloud vendors are very interested in a lot of different scenarios. And if you can think of the opportunity, I'll bet you somebody else has, and you probably can follow them and see how they accomplished what you're looking to do. A lot of different opportunities. So it's not a holistic thing, and I think that's the message on this slide, that it's not a holistic thing. In fact, Oracle, most of their sales are selling IaaS as a service, infrastructure as a service, not the full software as a service stack. So people are moving forward, and they're finding it to be a cost-effective solution for them. And I think that's something that every on-prem house ought to be looking at as an opportunity. So kind of to summarize up here, ownership pricing is what you get with on-prem. Monthly subscriptions, the rent versus buy question. On-prem, you get to manage it in-house. You have to manage it in-house. With the cloud, you can offload a lot of data center operations, and you may find that to be a cost-effective thing to do. We notice a number of our clients are moving from World to Enterprise One. There's a big push right now for that, and sadly, the reason is that it's hard to find RPG programmers. If you're in the World environment, it's hard to find RPG programmers, and if your RPG programmers are retiring, it's very difficult to hire a new person and have them want to train up in RPG. You know, new comp sci grads, RPG is antiquated to them. That is not where they want to spend their careers. And so for personnel reasons, a lot of people are moving off of World into cloud operations simply because they just don't, they can't maintain it in-house anymore. They got to get off because they don't have the resources anymore and they can't get them. The other one I'll mention here, current ERP meets their needs. If all your needs are being met, if you have no new capabilities that you see in cloud products, then I think that's something that you need to look at. But there is a lot of new functionality, new capabilities that I think are very compelling, even if it's difficult to put an ROI around it. But let's be truthful, right? It's always been hard to do an ROI on an ERP implementation. So no different here when it comes to the cloud. And again, to finalize, we already talked about this a bit, but leveraging your IT talent, or if you want to, reduce that IT budget, at least the personnel side of it. And there's always pressure, it seems these days, for people to do it. So kind of to summarize, I want to go back to a point I made a little bit earlier, and that is that what we find is that companies just develop an attitude that they want to move forward. They want to push forward. They see the future as cloud, and I think cloud is undeniable as a future. But I don't want to give you the impression that you're going to be able to calculate an ROI and get an answer out of a spreadsheet. I don't think that's how these decisions really get made anyway. But what I will say is there are some compelling reasons to move forward, and depending on what problem you're trying to solve, you might find that a cloud solution makes sense. So I don't want to come off as cloud is better than on-prem. I don't want you to walk away with that thought. What I was trying to do is show you why people are moving to the cloud, why that seems attractive to some of our clients, what they're telling us are the reasons and the things that they look at when they move to the cloud. So I hope that at least created some interest, maybe give you a starting point for what the things are that you would want to look at if you're looking at the cloud versus an on-prem solution. If there's any questions, I think, Steve, it's time for us to open up the channel and go to questions.
Sounds good. Thank you, Chris, for that presentation. Definitely gets you thinking about the differences and pros and cons. As I talk here, I'll just remind everyone that if you do have a question, submit that through your GoToWebinar questions pane and just hit enter, and we'll see them here and read them and answer them. Chris, I do have a couple here that I think would be good for you. The first one is it faster to implement a cloud solution than an on-premise system?
Yes, in general, that's a true statement. Steve, I think that's especially true for NetSuites. I think the time to implement is quite a bit shorter than we've traditionally seen in our JD Edwards practice. Am I accurate about that?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, we're seeing NetSuite implementations more in the 3 to 6 month time frame, whereas when we think about on-premise solutions, we typically think in terms of 6 to 12 months. probably with a 9-month target. NetSuite, I'm probably by default thinking about a more like a 4-month target. So certainly between those two solutions, the NetSuite, which is a cloud solution, is a little faster. On the ERP cloud side, I would say that the more robust, deep functionality does require kind of the same time frame as what we classically consider in an ERP implementation of more like a 9 to 12 months. So kind of depends on which solution you're talking about. Some of the cloud solutions can certainly go faster.
Yeah.
Another question here, Chris. I maybe help with this too, but do we need to worry about the system being slower on the cloud?
I think typically when we get this question, people are worried about internet latency, basically. The fact that it's not local or not in-house, actually on the premises, is their concern with that. What we've seen thus far, and I'll just say it that way because there's always going to be exceptions. What we've seen thus far, I'll make 2 points. Number one, no. People are not seeing that the system is slower than what they had before. Certainly, it's not slow enough that it's noticeable or a problem for their operations. But 2 points here. One is if you're talking about, and I'll use Oracle as an example, but all of the providers, they have multiple data centers all over the world, not just all over the U.S., but all over the world. And they will put you into a data center that is relatively close. Okay, so generally speaking, what they do is they will have 3 or 4 data centers that they form a cluster, and that's where some of the redundancy comes from. So while you'll run primarily on one, if there's any kind of a failover, you'll still be local. It just won't necessarily be the one that you're primarily on. And clients are seeing that that's not really an issue. Latency is not really an issue. However, one has to say that latency is almost always a result of the last mile into your facility. And it is going to be dependent on what kind of infrastructure you've got, I've had clients, and this would be true for remote sites for JD Edwards, for an on-prem solution. I've had clients that had to lay fiber. There was a trunk line a couple of miles away, but they didn't have any into their facility, and they had to lay that. So probably that's a bigger variable that you need to consider over and above what kind of latency is just inherent across the internet, or where your actual data center where you'll be housed, where that's going to sit. So, Steve, is that? Did you have something else to add to that question?
No, I just would agree. I think especially in the last handful of years, we've seen connection speeds are pretty negligible. You're getting vendors have optimized the amount of data that has to be passed back and forth is pretty small now, and internet bandwidth size requirements are very, very small to where it's almost not a concern anymore. Okay, well, that looks like all the questions that we had. If you have any others, feel free to submit those, and we'll be happy to answer those one-on-one. Chris, thank you for the presentation today. Very good job, and nice job of getting us to start to think about the difference between these two types of systems. And to everyone in the audience, thank you for your attention and participation today. Really appreciate it and hope that was valuable for you. Coming up here in just a few minutes at 3 o'clock, we'll have a presentation about mobile inventory, barcoding considerations. So look forward to everyone joining on that, and thank you very much.
Thank you.